Hello and welcome to The Real Beef. I'm Don Keith. Well, today I'm very excited to have with me the leader of Advance UK, Ben Habib. Ben has been the subject of much controversy ever since Rupert Lowe launched his political party, Restore Britain. The two men have been pitted against each other in the debate over ethno-nationalism versus civil nationalism. I'm very excited to have him on today. Let's bring him up. Ben, how are you, my friend?
I'm very well, thank you, Don. Good to see you.
Well, it's great to see you, man. Wow, you've had quite a few weeks here. You're all in the news, you're all in the podcast, you're all over social media. It's a big debate going on right now over ethno-nationalism and civil nationalism. Tell for my American audience who may not understand this debate, what is the difference between ethno-nationalism and civil nationalism as you see it?
So I would say that I'm not actually a civil nationalist. I'm a cultural nationalist,
Mhm.
which I think is very close to civic nationalism. The difference between where I'm at and where civic nationalists are is that civic nationalists, on the whole, believe in the institutions that govern the country. And whilst I think the institutions that we've created over hundreds of years of British history are terrific, they're in a complete state of disorder. So it's very hard to buy into them and support them at the moment. What I'm a firm believer in is that any country, any community, any society, any country needs a settled culture. You can't have lots of different cultures all coexisting alongside each other in separate silos. You've got to have a kind of homogeneous culture. And out of the and what is a culture? You heard me give this speech, of course, on the 7th of February. But what is a culture? It's multifaceted. It's a shared language, a shared history, a shared religion, or at least an understanding of what the religion of the country is, even if you don't fully subscribe to that religion, a belief in the national heroes of a country, um, uh, an understanding of our modern context, which comes from our shared history.
Mhm.
Um, the uh, you know, an adherence to a set of values and beliefs that are common amongst all of us.
Mhm.
Uh, Loving our music, loving our buildings, wanting and looking at our national statues with pride rather than wanting to bring them down. These are all facets of our culture. But also within culture is a legal framework. People often tend to think of culture in the way that I've just described it and not think in legal terms. But the reason our culture has been so damaged over the last 30 years has been significantly as a result of laws passed, like the Human Rights Act, that effectively did away with what it means to be a British citizen,
Mhm.
equating all foreigners to the same rights and privileges that a British citizen would get. And then we made things even worse in this country through the Equalities Act, which actually required positive discrimination, progressive discrimination in favor of ethnic minorities and foreigners who've come to this country. And so we set aside what it means to be British. We set aside our culture. We took the knee to foreign cultures. And now what we need in this country, and which is why I claim to be a firm cultural nationalist, is a reassertment of British cultural nationalism, you know, to reinforce to recolonize I don't know if the Americans have heard of this, but there's been a big move to decolonize the English language. We have to recolonize it. We have to, come to an understanding of who we are through our language, amongst other things, decolonizing our language, removing all vestiges of Britishness from our language was a deliberate move by the globalists to set aside our understanding of nationhood, and our culture, and so on. I'm on firm ground. I'm on the firm ground that we need to, re-establish what it means to be British, who we are as a people,
Mhm.
and where we wish to go.
Mhm.
That's cultural nationalism. Ethnic nationalism
Mhm.
is quite different. Ethnic nationalism, I'm sure, buys into all the cultural stuff that I've discussed, but it requires one step further. And the way it's being applied, at least in the current discourse, is that you've got to be of British ancestral blood. If you're English, you've got to be of English ancestral blood. And it breaks it down I think, a very unthought through, fundamentally flawed way, because to suggest that your ancestors all have to have been born in England begs the question, to be English, begs the question as to how far back you go. Now, that may make some sense in a society which has been ethnically pure. But the United Kingdom, England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, we're not ethnically pure. Over the centuries, we've had Vikings, we've had Saxons, we've had the Angles, who are the predominant, indigenous people of this country. We've had the Hanoverians, and then, of course, more recently, we've got people coming from other parts of the globe who are non-white, and so it's a much more nuanced form of Britishness that we have now, and it can't be applied with the blunt instrument, in my mind, of ethnic nationalism, which begs the question, as I say, as to how far back you go. Do we go back pre-Roman times to determine if we're English, or is it sufficient to go back one generation or two generations? How do you do this?
There is an element of ethno-nationalism with which, they believe that there is a concerted effort to erase the white Christian identities and majorities of Western countries. I mean, in America, Joe Biden let in 10 million or more non-whites during his presidency. So I think most Americans on the right here would agree with that. Do you believe that's the case? And do you believe that white Christians have the right to retain their nation's identities as the majority, white and Christian?
So this is why I think the polarization in the United Kingdom has occurred. There's been far too much mass immigration in the same way that you've experienced in the US. Mass immigration from cultures which are antithetical to our own culture. Frankly, I don't really care what the color of someone's skin is, but when you take in cultures which are antithetical to your culture, and then you put them on a pedestal like we have in this country, you're doing away with the settled state. Now, when I talk about dramatic demographic change, no society can tolerate dramatic demographic change. No society can, no matter what the legal system is, because the culture is being required to change at a rate with which it cannot keep up. All cultures evolve, but they tend to evolve. All peoples evolve, but they do it incrementally. If you want to do it peacefully with a settled state, understanding who you are as a people, as a nation, as a society, it can only be done slowly. Mass migration has effectively forced us into rapid demographic change. And I fully understand and sympathize with the notion that mass immigration, which has caused this dramatic demographic shift, is effectively doing away with people who've lived in this country for centuries and deserve the protection of who they are. They deserve to be protected. But the step towards ethno-nationalism, particularly the way it's being argued in the UK, effectively will take us down racial lines, which are going to be very hard to define. I'm talking about from a political perspective now, because politics is all about making policies and laws. If you go down the ethnic route from a political perspective, you end up inevitably doing it down racial lines. You start making laws that are basically racially prejudiced. At the moment, we have a whole set of laws, Don, that are racially prejudiced in favor of minorities. And the risk is that in trying to correct the position, we go to a position where we're basically going back to racial prejudice the other way. And that's a step too far in my mind. Does that make sense?
It does, but I would ask you, and I'd like for you to clarify, just so that I understand this. Over the last hundreds or thousands of years, depending on the Western country, most of our cultures have been shaped by people whose skin is white, who is not dark. So would you agree that white people, based on what we've seen with the mass immigration over the last couple of decades at least, do they have a right to be concerned about their erasure?
They have an absolute right to be concerned, and it needs to be stopped. And it absolutely has to be stopped. We've got to stop mass immigration. We've got to remove the right to remain in this country indefinitely if you've managed to get here. We've got to less liberally hand out British citizenship. Actually, an advanced UK government would cease the handing out of British citizenship to all foreigners. We'd have a state of emergency in the first few years of a government, and we would cease handing out British passports to anyone, any foreigner. And you've got to reverse some of it. You've got to encourage those who've migrated to your country to go back home, and to give them money if necessary to go back home. And when it comes to illegal migrants who are in the country, and we have an estimated 1.2 million plus illegal migrants in the UK, they must all be detained and deported, and all foreign criminals should be detained and deported. And we need to have policies which reassert British cultural nationalism. And it's not sufficient for us to integrate people who, the residual number of people who have a right to remain here. It's not good enough for us just to integrate them. We have to assimilate them. We have to make them of our own. Even if they continue to practice a foreign religion, they have to understand and recognize that our religion in the United Kingdom, the Christian religion, is our constitutional religion. And I don't think you can basically make all of the United Kingdom white again. To do that would require ethnic cleansing.
I agree.
That's a very dark road down which to go.
Yeah, I think modern transportation has ended any idea of a nation remaining ethnically pure, unless you are one of those who has kept up with it, like Japan, like you mentioned before, or maybe some or other nations who have really focused on doing that. I think we as white Christians are so welcoming and tolerant of other people that we've allowed in other ethnicities, other cultures into our nations. And I think now that we have this mass modern transportation, it's impossible to get it back. So I think anybody is delusional that thinks you're going to have an all white or really any ethnicity country in Europe, especially, or in the Americas or anywhere like that. It's not going to happen. It's not possible. I think people are delusional.
But I think what we can do is absolutely stop the demographic change in its tracks, and we can significantly reverse it by encouraging a number of people to go home who are here legally and deporting people who are here illegally. Let me put that into context. We've got 6.5 million EU member citizens in the United Kingdom who are not effectively British. We've got 5 million Muslims in the United Kingdom. We've got a number of other millions who are here, as I say, over 1 million illegally. There are, out of the 68, 70 million population that we have, 10 to 15 million, if you like, are foreigners, one way or another. And we can encourage many of them to go home. We can deport those that are illegally here. And in doing so, and assimilating the rest who have a right to remain, who have a genuine right to remain, then we can settle the situation. But if we go full tilt ethno-nationalism, I'm not suggesting that any political party in the United Kingdom is proposing what I'm about to say, what I'm about to speak out against. There's no political party proposing it. But if there is a move towards ethnic cleansing, then we know where that ends. That's a very violent. That's a very violent and
we've seen that show before.
Approach.
Yeah.
Well,
I only
that goes, and that's
for sure. And I only press you on that because a lot of the critics of you online, some of the posts I've seen, have said that Ben's gaslighting us, trying to make us believe that the whites aren't being erased in Britain, or that we don't have an immigration problem or things like that. But the conversations you and I have had offline led me to believe that you understood that white people were actually becoming. Well, if you look at the last 100 years, the statistics themselves will tell you that the data shows you that we were 30% the white planet 100 years ago. Today we're 8 or 9% white. So, and some of that's our own fault because our birth rates have decreased. We need to really up our birth rates if we want to, compete with other races and cultures and things like that. But that's why I pressed you on it, because those are some of the comments I'm seeing that you were gaslighting and you didn't understand that. But from what you just told me, you do have an idea of that.
Oh, I completely get it. Listen, I've seen on the streets of London the rate of demographic change in the last 5 years. I'm sure you've seen it. You probably see it more starkly than I do because you fly in and out, so you see the shift. And it's been dramatic. And that's unacceptable. No society, no culture, no people can sustain this rate of change. And there will be pushback. And there will be elements in our society now who want to do it violently, if necessary, to go back to where they wish to be, which is a completely legitimate desire to go back, to a settled state where the majority are effectively what they would describe white indigenous people. I totally understand that.
Yeah. I want to talk about something that was pretty big news this week. You're on Dan Wooten, you spoke about it then, but someone leaked a private DM of you saying that Restore Britain had gone full tilt racist and will continue. But I wanted to ask you some questions about that. But before I did, I wanted just to pull some up to show folks. What I'm about to pull up is just some of the comments, and this is just a few of hundreds or perhaps thousands that you were seeing online directed at you. I want to give people an idea, and you and I discussed this before, if you were comfortable with me doing this, but I'm going to read them because I want these posts to have all of the power that the people who wrote them intended for them to have, and I want them to get all the attention that they wanted to get when they wrote these. These are coming from X. The first one from G-Stress says, "You are a subhuman, packy, rape children's piece of shit." From Alec, we've got, "You're just another filthy packy. You are neither English nor British." From the Prime Misanthrope, we've got, "I feel sorry for the true British people who were scammed by this packy bastard." From the Saracen Groiper, who managed to get 2 racial slurs in there, he says, "Cope, packy nigga." From Reese Bronze, you can clear the fuck out with the rest of the packy trash." From Globalist Slayer, "Fuck off, Ben. This is our home. You are a fucking guest. I hope Restore Britain fucking deports you. It's one thing to come here and rape and kill, but to pretend you are one of us and try to gaslight us is just as bad. Retire your party, you packy bastard." I got a couple more. This is from a guy named White, and this is referencing your mother. "Absolutely vile that an Aryan woman was taken by a filthy packy, and now you exist." From Mag of Cascadia, "Fuck off, packy scum." And from K-Tex, "So your mom is a packy shagger then." So that's the type of things you were seeing online. I think when you made that DM or a private message that someone leaked. I don't know who leaked it or if you've stated that or anything like that. But my question is, why do you think, after seeing all these posts, I saw massive ones of them myself without even looking at these, that were really horrific. Why do you think all of those people immediately attacked you rather than the people who made those comments?
I mean, it's extraordinary, Don. As some viewers may or may not know, I'm half English. My mother's blonde, blue-eyed, white. My father is Pakistani. I've lived in this country. I was brought up in a kind of fluid Christian culture as a child. Then I came to rugby school in England. I had the great privilege of going to rugby, which at the center of its education put pride in the United Kingdom. When I was brought up, we were brought up to believe the British Empire was a phenomenal force for good, that we were the good guys in World War II, that Winston Churchill, Nelson, Wellington, Peel, Wilberforce, Cecil Rhodes, all these people were national heroes and deservedly so. And I've gone through life largely without any racism directed at me since 1979 when I first came here.
Mhm.
And this is the first bit of racism I've experienced because I've thought of myself entirely as English. I've never questioned my own identity. And this is where I think the debate gets really quite difficult, because if someone has to be entirely English, whatever that means, to have the right to be English, then you're kind of screwed. There's no way you can have a peaceful settlement in this country. What these people who want to be pure, they have to define what they mean by pure English. It hasn't really been defined because, as you might remember from my Dan Wooten interview, I was giving the example of Winston Churchill. In my mind, the greatest Englishman that ever lived. He wrote a 4-volume history of the English-speaking people. He was the savior of this country for 2 years before your great country decided to enter World War II. He kept us safe. He is half American, and his mother was part Native American, apparently. He's no more English than I am. So just because I'm brown, am I not allowed to identify myself as English. Then the problem gets even more complex if you take my two sons, as I think you would have heard me describe, Don. One son, so I married an apparently English girl. She was half English. She is half English, a quarter Russian, and a quarter Scottish. So actually, she's technically no more English than I am, even though I'm brown and she's white. And I've had two sons, both of whom are half English, a quarter Pakistani, a quarter Scottish, and a quarter Russian. And one son is white and one son is brown. So do you kick out the brown son to Pakistan and
Yeah.
keep the white son that I
Yeah, only one of those is English, right? According to
only
some
one of those only one of those looks English. Both, I can assure you, have nothing other than English blood coursing through their veins.
Mhm.
And the other thing I just want to mention is if people want to deport me to Pakistan, why would Pakistan take me back? I'm no more Pakistani than I am English.
Right.
They may look at me and go, no, sod off. You stay in England. We don't want you. You know, this debate becomes very, very complex if you start making policy based down this line. What we need to do in this country is peacefully move the pendulum back to a position where the white majority population of the United Kingdom no longer feel that their identity is being threatened, where their culture, which they associate with, which I associate with, which is my culture, is the dominant culture and is understood to be the dominant culture, so they don't feel threatened. So we're all comfortable. That's where we need to go, which is why on the 7th of February, I made that speech about culture being, who we are as a people, reasserting it, as I've said in this podcast in my opening remarks. We've got to do that peacefully. If we yank that pendulum back forcefully and we overcorrect, we'll actually end up in a kind of dystopian society. This requires very careful handling. After 30 years of abuse of our demography and our culture, we need a very careful swing back of the pendulum. We've got to do it very, very gently and carefully. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes a lot of sense. And if you take in a lot of nations, not just Britain, if you take all the non-white people out based on just the birth rates alone, you wouldn't exist for very long. You'd be extinguishing yourselves because you couldn't keep up.
And one of the other policies we've got, one of the other policies is to encourage working and middle class people in this country to have children, to make it affordable to have children, to destigmatize women having children and taking time off work in order to have those children, and to encourage mothers, mostly mothers, but if not a mother, one of the spouses, to be at home, to find mechanisms for one of the spouses to be at home, to bring up their children, so that we can once again flourish through birth as well. That's critical.
Yeah.
If we want to protect our country and our demography, then we've got to start procreating.
Yeah. How does it make you feel when you see those type of horrible comments I read? How does it make you feel on a personal level? How does it feel when you see them? Does it bother you at all?
So, I must be a very robust individual because it doesn't penetrate me. I just look at them and think they're bloody idiots.
Yeah.
They're not thinking straight. At one level, the only level at which it concerns me is that the country is being torn apart. It's being torn apart, and people who are unable to get to the root cause of the problem and come up with solutions that can be peacefully applied and give them the result they want are going down a path which they will regret. That's what I worry, that we'll go down a path which we will regret. And it's up to politicians to ensure that that doesn't happen, that we go about this in a sensible way. And that's why I'm so alarmed when political figures, people who are standing for office or are in office, are actually allowing this genie, allowing this Pandora's box to open, because they won't be able to close it. And they're giving succor to these extreme voices. Right. That's why I said, and that's why I think that's where I think Restore Britain has gone. And it's a tragedy. And they've gone there really quickly, Don. They've done it in 2 or 3 weeks. And you've got people like Steve Laws, who claims to be the biggest racist in the United Kingdom.
I'm familiar with him. Yeah, he chimes in on a lot of my posts because I'm friends because they don't like Tommy Robinson either because he's Tommy.
Not racist.
Well, yeah, exactly. But he always has something smart to say. He's not a real smart guy, but he's and he is very racist. But one of the things I keep getting online when I point this stuff out is, oh, we don't racism. Calling us racism doesn't bother us anymore because the left has done. I agree. Right, the racists, the left has completely taken the power away from the word racism. But to me, there is a difference in crying racism where there is none versus decrying it when it's very obvious. So it is still prevalent, especially now. I don't know. Who do you think's pushing this? Do you think? I know some of these are bots, not the ones I read are accounts, but some of these are bots. But I think the large majority were actual. Somebody online actually did a analysis of them, said that some of them were bots, but a large portion of them were actual people. A lot of these people are claiming restore if they're really restore. I don't know how we would prove that unless we just had because a lot of them don't use their real names and things like that because they're cowards. But um, yeah,
Yeah, but Steve Laws, for example, endorses Restore Britain, and he's a member of Restore Britain. And I understand that he clearly, Rupert Lowe, the leader of Restore Britain, cannot
police everyone. Yeah.
He can't police his members. But I think it would be appropriate for Rupert Lowe to say that he denounces Steve Law's view of life. I think that would be an appropriate comment from a leader of a political party.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you do have official spokesmen for Restore Britain who are sailing very, very close to the line, invoking, I think, stirring the pot.
Oh, yeah. Go full tilt. Yeah, I saw that. When you said your released DM, you were saying that Restore has gone full tilt racism or racist, and they will continue. And then the next day, Rupert or his team puts out a massive tweet that says "Go full tilt Restore," which I understand could be perceived as sarcasm. I understand your British sarcasm. Believe it or not, we have sarcasm in the U.S. People in Britain who criticize me for pointing that out don't seem to think we have sarcasm in America, but I totally get it. But I think it's really poor taste, even if it is sarcasm, when you're trying to build a political party, to come out with that type of sarcasm rather than denounce all of the things instead of denouncing everything you've seen, the hundreds of terribly racist tweets and comments and things like that. You choose to be funny or think you're being funny or sarcastic to come out with something like that. I just think it was in poor taste. I don't know that it was necessarily intentionally racist. Now that I look at it, I know initially I actually tweeted on that. I think Dan posted my tweet on there because to me, it is kind of irresponsible if you're trying to build a party to come out with something like that, because a lot of the folks were commenting on my stuff saying, yeah, I'm leaving. A lot of people left Restore that commented on me said, yeah, I don't think I can be with Restore anymore after seeing all these comments and tweets and then the thing he put out. But yeah, I just think he could have come out, like you said, and denounce it. I still think he should. And listen, I've always supported Rupert. I like Rupert. I think would be a strong leader, but I don't know if he could be a strong leader if he has a huge racist element in his party like that, and if he doesn't address it. Because and I tell people this, when Trump came around in 2015, when he came down the escalator and announced his Republican candidacy, he immediately fractured and splintered the right. People hated him. Marco Rubio hated him. If you look at some of these debates that Trump was in with other people who we love on the right now, like Marco Rubio, who hated him, that's a Secretary of State now. Ted Cruz hated him. Trump wants to appoint Ted Cruz to the Supreme Court now. So Trump was able to unite all of these people that were fractured initially. And I think any leader in Britain, whether it be you, whether it be Rupert or anyone else, is going to have to find some way to unite the right and get over all of this minutia we see right now in the United Kingdom and bring the right and the conservative right together and the policies, because ultimately its ideology is far more important than the color of your skin, because there's a lot of people with your skin color based in bougie who I like Baraka, who came under fire this week, are friends of mine. They're very conservative, and I would hold that most of their values and your values are in line with a lot of what the ethno-nationalists believe, other than this racial aspect of it. You all want the same thing. You all want to kill the mass migration in your country. You all want to get rid of the illegal immigrants and deport illegal immigrants and stop the Pakistani rape gangs and the cousin marriages and all of those things you all agree on. Those are the things that are important to save your country. What difference does it make the color of the skin of the person that casts that ballot in your country? It makes absolutely no sense. And I don't understand people who are supposed intellectuals, some of the supposed forward thinkers in your country, would come out with some of the rhetoric. And I'm just to illustrate, I'm going to give you this. This is a guy who I like a lot of what he says. This is from Carl Benjamin. And this was a meme, a Family Guy meme, where he says Rupert issuing passports, and you can see it's a Family Guy. He's the lower picture. He's saying white's okay. Anything other than these are the different colors of white. Anything other than white is not okay. Then Carl at the top, he retweets the image and fixes it with these varying flags from Britain, replacing all of the white. What do you make of this? What do you think Carl meant by this when he posted it? Give me your interpretation.
Well, the only way to interpret it is the way it's been presented, that effectively you've got to be white to be English or white to be Welsh, or I can't make any other interpretation of it. He's replaced the lighter shades with flags of the United Kingdom. So in other words, you've got to be of that color to be British. And that's not a helpful, it's not a helpful meme. Now, it may be tongue in cheek, but it ain't helpful. And just on the full tilt thing, can I just come back to the full tilt?
Go ahead.
I've got a pretty good grasp of English, and I don't think that was sarcastic. I think that was them saying "F you, we don't give a damn." And again, I think it plays into that irresponsible form of politics. And what's happened here, I think, it's not for me. I'm just going to give you my thoughts.
Sure.
Rupert Lowe is surrounded by some very young guys. Charlie Downs, the spokesman for Restore Britain, is 24 years old. Another guy who speaks for Restore Britain is Colin Tomlinson. He's 27. The chap who puts all Rupert's posts on Twitter together. Rupert doesn't post on Twitter. They're all drafted by a guy called Alistair Harrison, who is Rupert's right-hand man. They can see the likes and the clicks and the reposts that they get when they put out this kind of clickbait stuff. And I think it's encouraged them down this clickbait route. So Rupert gets masses of likes now on the tweets that Alistair Harrison puts out because of this clickbait approach to life. And I think they've somehow seen that as representative of where the British people want to be. But I don't think the British people want this at all. And I know that it's not good for the country. And so Rupert needs to assert he needs to assert some firm hand on the tiller of the direction of travel and the use of the language that they've got. He's got to bring that back to normality.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that a lot of people still don't understand is that the majority of people in most countries, and probably every country, and especially Britain, they're not all in the X bubble. They don't get their news from X. So when you have this large portion of people in Restore who are just openly and so emboldenedly racist now, that's what the people who aren't in the X bubble are going to see on the mainstream media, because they're going to try to destroy Rupert anyway because he's on the right, just like they do with you. So the mom and pop sitting at home who don't subscribe to X or any other social media platforms are still getting their news from legacy media and the newspaper, on television. That's all they're going to see are that, the headline's going to be that Restore has gone full tilt racist, and they're going to show all these things. They're not going to show it as sarcasm or anything else. They're not going to portray it any other way. They're going to want the Greens and the Labours and their parties in there, because we all know the legacy media are lapdogs for the left, and that's all they're going to see. So the people, whoever's running Restore's account or any other one on the right's account, needs to understand that they're going to take everything you put on X and they're going to put it on that legacy media. And they're going to swing that the way they want it to swing for their parties to win.
It won't be difficult to do it.
No.
This is tragic because, Rupert Lowe, I think, had all the potential to be a prime minister of this country. But unless he gets a grip of this problem, the Telegraph, the Express, the Daily Mail, when it comes to a general election, all they're going to do is put out stuff about racism. This is what happened. This is what Steve Law says. This is what so-and-so says. Rupert needs to sack people in his party who hold the views that allow this kind of narrative to get established. And he needs to dissociate himself from people like Steve Laws. If he wants to form a government, he has to do that. And he needs to do it quickly and make a clear cut. Otherwise, he's going to poison the right-hand side of politics. He won't unify it. He'll poison it.
Yeah. You were talking about on Wooten, you warned that ethno-nationalist rhetoric could legitimize separatists in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, and unleash despicable violent voices, I believe is the word you use. What are some concrete examples of that, of how Restore Britain's approach is already risking the Union?
If you speak up for English nationalism through English ethnicity, what you're effectively saying correctly from a non-political perspective, what you're correctly saying is there is a Scottish ethnicity, a Welsh ethnicity, and an Ulster ethnicity, all of which is correct. They all have their separate the languages. They have a different accent. The way they interact with each other is slightly different, and so on. And the minute you do that, and you say, well, actually, England needs to be politically now, not philosophically or culturally, but now politically, England needs ethnicity. If that ethnicity politically needs to be recognized, because as a political party, it's all about politics, right? So it's about making what the policy for England. The minute you start making policies for England, you're going to start making policies effectively for Scotland, and you'll start tearing at the threads that which established the kingdom in 1707. We're not actually a nation. We're a kingdom. I keep saying the nation of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, but we are a kingdom. We're a kingdom of 4 nations: Scotland, Wales, England, and Northern Ireland. And if you start tearing at these threads, it'll unwind very quickly. We're a consensual arrangement, which has worked so well since 1707 for Great Britain, and then since 1800 for when Ireland was brought in and the United Kingdom was formed. And what a tragedy it would be, Don, if in the pursuit of trying to rectify these issues, which we all wish to rectify, we end up destroying the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. What a tragedy that would be. It needs careful handling.
Yeah. Yeah, you were talking earlier. That reminded me. I don't know why that reminded me, but there was I believe the 1700s or thereabouts, a line of kings that had no English blood at all. I think was it Denmark, some of your kings, but there's a long list of royalty from your country that had only half English, or some of them had no English blood at all. So if you research anyway, that's kind of just thinking about that when you talked about Scotland and Ireland for some reason.
I mean, I think for the ethno-nationalists, this is a big problem. Can you hear me, Don?
Yeah, I hear you. One of the things they've said. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think for anyone who wishes to take their English lineage from their ancestors, I think our royal family is a real problem, because George I, who was the first king of Great Britain, Great Britain was established in 1707. He was the first king of Great Britain, was born in Germany. He was a Hanoverian. He's not even a Saxon. People like to talk about we're Anglo-Saxon. He wasn't even a Saxon. He was a Hanoverian, born in Germany, didn't speak a word of English.
Wow.
His son was born in Germany. And then the first monarch you get is George III being born in England. And then you get Queen Victoria after him. And you get George IV, but then you get Queen Victoria. And Queen Victoria was born in Germany. She was half German. and then she married a German.
Yeah.
Edward VII was 3/4 German. And the current king is more German and Greek than he is English. So would if there is an ethno-nationalist tilt, would they deport King Charles?
Yeah.
You get into a real muddle.
Yeah, and one of the things I've seen when I point that out, the people they'll say, "Well, that wasn't the era of mass migration," so they try to find some way, an excuse as to why those people may still be English because it wasn't during the era of mass migration.
Can I give you another example?
Yeah, sure.
If I may. We had the biggest empire on earth, even bigger than the influence America has ever had. I just get that in there now. And before 1948, every subject of the British Empire was a British subject.
Hmm.
And I interviewed a lovely, lovely man yesterday, Tony Sewell. I don't know if you know him, Don. Lord Sewell. So. He's a Tory.
Okay.
He's a lovely guy, but he still hasn't left the Tory party.
Except for the Tory part, right?
Except for the Tory part. Now, he was born in 1959 to two parents who came from Jamaica. They left Jamaica with a British passport. Both parents left Jamaica with a British passport because they were British subjects. And he came here, he was born here, he's black. He was born here in 1959. He's a peer in the House of Lords. He has a British passport. In my mind, he's British. What are you going to do? Deport him back to Jamaica? You know, and I just want to say something else to the ethno-nationalists. Places like Jamaica and Pakistan, when I was born there, preserved British colonial culture better than we've preserved it here. It's now gone. It's now gone in Pakistan. I think it still exists in the Caribbean islands to a significant extent. When I go to Barbados and Antigua, I see so much wonderful British colonial history of which they're still proud. They carry it through their culture. It's gone in Pakistan because Islam has, Wahhabi Islam has taken over. But as a child, I experienced it. And we loved our British imperial history. We loved the United Kingdom. So there's no threat. It's such a nuanced position. There's so many different strands to this. You would end up throwing out Lord Sewell from the United Kingdom, this man who utterly loves this country, who is of this country, simply because he's black.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing to me that the truth is what they really mean is you're not English unless you're white. Unless you're white, excuse me. That's what they truly mean. So they don't. No, none of them will. Well, some of them will openly say it, like the comments I've read to you. But if you look at the people who like to envision themselves as intellectuals, as popular commentators, and things like that, they'll never come out and say British just means all white. They'll just refer to British ancestry, which we know means the exact same thing. They just can't use the word white because they don't want to get that moniker of racist attached.
Another point that, sorry, forgive me. Just another really interesting consequence of the approach they're taking. They all speak out against multiculturalism correctly. They all speak out about multiculturalism.
Yeah.
But if you say, for example, that anyone who's black in this country has a British passport is technically a citizen, but is a second-class citizen, if you say anyone who's got a skin color that's not white and holds a British passport is a second-class citizen in some way, you are effectively reinstituting multiculturalism. It's multiculturalism in a different way.
Yeah.
What we've got to do is remove from the country. Yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes plenty of sense. That's one thing I hate even the idea of multiculturalism. I don't think it works. I don't think it's ethnicities. I don't think is a problem when you have multiple ethnicities, but a diversity of ideologies is what kills country. So I think when people come in, either they come in legally into your country or they're born into your country, they have to have those that same moral value system, same legal principles, faith as much as possible. I know it's impossible to root out every other faith but Christian, but I think predominantly Christianity in Western countries should always be the predominant religion. And I think anyone coming into the country needs to be willing to accept that and accept that as the culture and not try to change it so that your culture assimilates to their culture rather than they assimilate to yours. So I think there is a set of ideals in Western countries, in Britain and America, where you have to come in and accept those values, or either the multiculturalism will destroy you. Now, the one thing we don't have in America is this whole debate over ethno-nationalism versus civil nationalism. Perhaps it's because we are the melting pot of the world, as they say. But even the racists in our country don't agree that the people they hate aren't American. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They may call you the worst racial slurs in the world, but they won't call you un-American just because we
Yeah.
are the melting pot, and we don't accept that because you're born here and you're black, or you're born here and you're brown. You're not American. It's a whole different premise. And I understand the history behind the United or behind England, and that they've existed for a lot longer. They haven't been the world's melting pot like we are. I understand that whole argument. It's just kind of to me looking in, it just makes no sense at all. The whole you have to
No.
be white to be British. It makes no sense at all. It's
I
just,
mean, your
and quite
country,
frankly, yeah, go ahead.
I think I texted you the other day, and of course, I wouldn't wish to presume to speak for your country, but your country has done something quite remarkable. You've managed to write a constitution which has bound the people of your country together successfully,
Mhm.
and it stood the test of time. You know, I always thought the British constitution, which is unwritten, which has evolved incrementally over time, a
Still
very
evolving.
is still evolving. A very subtle, sensitive organism is our constitution, or was until Tony Blair got hold of it and tried effectively, in part, to codify it, which has gone wrong, which is what we have to undo. But well, I thought our little unwritten approach to life was the best way because it allows cultures to evolve slowly, for modernity to take effect, and for historic entrenchment not to trump progression of the people. But what you've done, which is, I have to take my hat off to the United States of America, is you've written a constitution which still bloody well serves you. It
Yeah.
serves you so bloody well. It's
Yeah.
a phenomenal achievement that you've done. You told me the other day, it's not just the constitution, it's also the institutions around it.
Well, that's right. It's the three branches of government, along with I think our system of government, the three branches that keep each other in check and make sure that that Constitution stays in check. That's what those things working together, our founding documents and our system of government with our legislative, judicial, and executive branch. That's how our system works. So I always often wonder. We are the wealthiest nation on earth. I believe we're the freest nation on earth when it comes to things like speech and religion, freedom of the press, and things like that. We are so powerful. We're so free and wealthy. I've always wondered why other countries don't just go adopt our whole system. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I wonder
I mean, of
what it is
course, we're
behind
not
that.
you. We're not you. So
You're not, but I always wonder what would it take for a country like Britain to have a constitution written in stone rather than these court precedents and statutes
yeah.
and parliamentary decisions that make up your living and breathing constitution, which we don't have, even though the leftists here will tell you it is a living, breathing document. That was something that was cooked up, I think, by Woodrow Wilson, one of the worst racists we've ever had as president. But why do you think it is that a country like Great Britain wouldn't sort of have a document like our Constitution set in
No, I
stone so that
think
they solidify
I
everything?
think I mean I think the issue is that I think the issue, Don, is that we need to first restore that which has been set aside before we do any more reformation. We
Mhm.
need to go back to a settled state of our constitution. I mentioned Tony Blair. Tony Blair, he raped our constitution. He raped this wonderful, subtle, sensitive um, way of life that we had established, that had taken place, you know, that had come to be into being over thousands of years. He raped it by codifying it with the Human Rights Act, the Equalities Act, the Supreme Court, which we didn't have before, removing the law lords from the House of Lords, getting rid of the hereditary peers from the House of Lords, giving the Bank of England independence. He absolutely ripped and raped our constitution. And what we've got to do is get rid of all the bastardization of this country that's taken place as a result of Tony Blair and successive governments. And I think once we get back there, once we're settled, if we can settle ourselves, then I think we maybe should look at something which will prevent what he did ever happening again.
Mm,
We must make sure it never happens again.
mhm. How are you going to get out of the ECHR? How are you going to get out all that
It's
nonsense?
easy. It's easy to get out of the ECHR. You revoke the Human Rights Act. You denounce the convention. You leave the convention. You pull out of the European Court of Human Rights. And if the EU and the Republic of Ireland all kick up a fuss, you tell them to go sling their hook. We don't give a shit. We're going to do it.
It's funny because sling their hook. I don't think we have that saying here. That's funny.
Well, take your hook out and bugger off.
Yeah. No, I get it.
And we've got to have a slightly Trumpian approach to that. It's our country. Get out. It's our country.
Yeah. And what could you do to facilitate that? Say, if you were prime minister, or say Advance UK becomes this major political party, what could you do to facilitate an exit from the ECHR and all these other restrictive policies from Europe that are really killing Great Britain right now?
I mean, we would repeal I often talk, you would have heard me talk about going into Parliament on the first day of government with the draft legislation already approved by the British people during the general election. That draft legislation, to a very significant extent, is only going to be the repealing of laws that we've put in place over the last 30 years. Repeal, 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 repeal. And people will say, Ben, you'll have a legislative vacuum. If you repeal everything, you'll have a vacuum. How will you be able to operate? But that's what was so beautiful about the British system. We didn't need laws to tell us what we could do. We did whatever we wished to do, unless there was a law that prohibited us from doing it. And so if we go back to the 1996 constitutional setup that we had, we would be perfectly at peace like that. We could do it on a dime, Don, on a dime. The EU wouldn't like it. They would try and economically sanction us, impose tariffs, and we need to therefore have an economic policy that can see the EU off. But it's all doable. Trump has shown that it's doable.
Right.
Screw them. Even if we have some economic hardship, we should not sacrifice our constitution, our culture, and our people because there's going to be some economic hardship. We must face the economic hardship if there is any. I don't believe there needs to be any. But if there is, we face it and we save our country. That's why we went to war in World War II. We didn't go to World War II for economic benefit. We went to war to save our way of life, to save our constitution, our culture, our people.
Who was responsible for that Constitution of '96 you referred to?
So that the constitutional settlement we had in 1996 was unwritten. It came down from our forefathers, starting from Magna Carta downwards, a series of documents, a body of law, which all work together incredibly well. My daughter says to me, she went to Bristol University, so she's quite left-wing. I hope she doesn't watch this podcast. She says to me,
I'll send it
Daddy,
to her.
she says, Daddy, if you revoke the Human Rights Act, we won't have human rights in the UK. And I go, well, no, darling, that's not right. We had human rights through the body of law that existed.
Right.
We had a Bill of Rights which goes back to 1688. We don't need the European Convention of Human Rights or the Human Rights Act, which is the embodiment of the ECHR in our body of law. We don't need that to tell us how to observe human rights. We bloody established human rights.
Yeah.
We did it in this country way before the rest of the world. And so we just need to go back to where we were.
Yeah, we got a lot of our ideas from you guys. Your Bill of Rights, the parliamentary system, that all comes. Well, you guys got the parliamentary system from the Greeks. We adopted it from you guys. But yeah, you are responsible from a lot of the democratic systems throughout, I think, Europe and much of the world today. Even though I think we perfected it here in the United States, you are responsible for the initial ideas, a lot of the initial ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're the mother of modern democracy. We're the mother of modern democracy.
Yeah, you guys got to work on that speech deal, though, man, because your free speech laws suck there, man. They're terrible. You know what I mean?
Which one is that? Sorry, just remind
your free speech laws, which are pretty much non-existent. You got to work on that.
Have to be repealed.
Yeah.
They have to be. We're the mother of democracies, and we set our own democracy aside.
Yeah. I have a couple other points I want to talk about, and I hate to move back to this restore controversy, but there's some questions I really wanted you to answer because I see a lot of the critics online and things people are saying. So I want to give you an opportunity to address those. One of those have been some of the folks from Restore who say that Rupert Lowe asked you not to start a political party. Is that the case?
That is not true. Rupert Lowe, whatever he may say, had agreed to lead what became Advance UK. It was going to be called Restore Britain. The political party we were going to launch was going to be called Restore Britain. We had bought all the trademarks and everything for Restore Britain, which we then handed over to Rupert Lowe when he did his movement.
Mm-hmm.
He was going to lead the party that we were jointly launching. He decided in late May, early June 2025, he didn't want to do it. And I said, well, I think we need a party. He said he needed a movement. He went on with his movement. I launched our party. He never said, don't do a party. He said he didn't want to do a party. That's his prerogative. And
Right.
it's my prerogative to do a party.
Right.
And
So he never looked at you and said, Ben, don't do a party, but basically.
No, never looked at me and said, don't do a party.
Yeah.
But Don, we were right, weren't we? We were right to do a party. He's gone round to doing a party. He's realized you have to have a party.
Yeah, not long after you started yours, he started. Are you at can you talk about any of the communications you guys have had that led you to believe that he was going to join your party?
Yeah, so I had wanted all of this to be kept confidential, but Restore Britain has leaked a few things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Don, because I have verified it to you,
Mm-hmm.
that there is an exchange between Rupert and me in which it's confirmed that the party should go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
In May 2025. There's an exchange.
What was the exchange? How was it confirmed?
It was. I said I am buying software required to create the backbone of a political party. It's going to cost me £13,000. Can I just confirm you're not going to join the Tories? And he texted me back and he said, I confirm I'm on. The Tories are done.
Mm.
And
was that a written or verbal communication?
Written.
Oh, so you have that communication?
Yeah, I have that communication. Yeah, it's a text. But I mean, he said, go ahead and buy the backbone of a party. I bought the backbone of a party. We had an agreement. He decided he didn't want to lead it. And so that's how it happened.
Wow. Well, that's just completely opposite of really what he said and what the folks who support him have said. If you've got the email where he told you to go ahead and buy the software for the party, and I don't know how much more confirmation you could get than that, but I guess we could let him answer that question. Yeah. You publicly offered a merger on February 14th and withdrew it after Restore Britain's increasing ethno-nationalist tilt. Do you view Rupert's decision to launch Restore Britain as a separate party as a deliberate rejection of civil nationalism?
Well, I call it cultural nationalism. Sorry to labor the point, but do
you think they're the same? Or civil or cultural nationalism the same, or are they different?
Well, in my mind, they're slightly different because civic nationalism endorses the institutions that we have, and I don't. I think the House of Lords has been desperately damaged. I think the Bank of England is desperately damaged. Yeah. The Supreme Court is. I hate the Supreme Court, so I don't endorse the institutions that Tony Blair created in this country. So I don't buy into the institutions that we currently have, and they need restoration as well. So I'm really a cultural nationalist. It's a very, very fine difference. But I didn't know Rupert Lowe was going to reject cultural or civic nationalism. I had no idea he was going to reject it. But it would appear over the last, correct me if you disagree, Don. You watch our politics very closely. There's been a dramatic hardening of Restore Britain's position away from civic or cultural nationalism towards this ethno-based nationalism. You tell me, have I got it wrong, or you're watching?
No, but just from what I see with my own eyes, it looks like a lot of honestly, it's very similar to what's happening in the United States right now with this really hard, you might say, woke right or alt-right push for extremism on the right, with the people like Nick Fuentes or some of the other guys that follow Jake Shields and people like that would really push for this whole like white, everything needs to be white pretty much. It looks like that same push is happening, and the majority of it looks like pretty much all of it that I see are people who say they support Restore. And I'm not accusing Rupert of by any means igniting that flame. I just think for some reason people feel that more emboldened and that they're able to take that extreme point of view under Rupert's umbrella. Why that is, I don't know. I'm not suggesting that Rupert's responsible in any way, but that's what I see
Well, I
just
think
looking
it's
at social media.
I think it's this young cohort,
Uh-huh.
these 20-year-old plus something guys who they haven't thought it through. They haven't understood the political. They're all podcasters. They all come from podcasting background. Nothing
Yeah,
wrong with that.
yeah,
And they're having the debate, and the debate needs to be had. We need to debate who we are as a people. This is a very valid debate to have. Ethnicity, culture, language, history. We need to debate all of this, correct?
yeah.
But when it comes to a political party, you're into a different level. Then you're talking about making policies, and these young people haven't left behind the debate. They're like sort of students who are having a political debate, and now they're taking that into a political party, and that's dangerous. And because
Very young students, almost children. Some of these
yeah,
folks, the
and you
comments
see
they make.
the clickbait. The
Yeah,
guy who runs Rupert's tweets, the guy who drafts them all, I don't know
yeah,
how old he's 33, 34, and
yeah.
he's getting positive feedback from all the likes that on the tweets, on the posts that he drafts. And so he's encouraged to do more of it.
Mm.
And Rupert's not saying, hold on, mate. We need to steady this ship. Rupert needs to steady the ship. He needs to steady the ship.
Yeah, it's almost as if part of me, because I've heard even and my friend Tommy, he said I heard him on a show recently. Said Rupert is our Donald Trump. I don't know if he still feels like that, but at the time he said that that's right after Rupert launched his party. I think a lot of people. I think Rupert is trying too hard to be Trump. What he doesn't understand about Trump is that Trump had always came out and denounced racism. There was a famous episode in from Charlottesville. You may remember this. It was global, where these neo-Nazis and white extremists came out. They tried to topple these statues, and one lady ended up getting killed during these riots. Well, there was a famous incident where Trump came out on television. He talked about it all. He said there were very fine people on both sides. And I'm not talking about the racist, the white supremacists and extremists. They should be condemned totally. Well, the media cut that last part out, and he only said there are very fine people on both sides. But it was from that point, that was just at the beginning of his first term, where he came out immediately and he denounced these people, these extreme racists. And every time the media would ask him, he would say, "I completely denounce." So even Trump came out from the get-go and denounced this extreme rhetoric, this white racists and extremists. And I feel like, in a way, Rupert is trying to mimic the trajectory of Donald Trump, but he doesn't realize that Trump always denounced the racist from day one. He did, and I think that's just something you should do if you have a large a large part of your base or your supporters are, you know, appearing to be racist. Let's just put it that way. I think it's necessary to just come out and say, no, we don't want any of those folks. We don't subscribe to that. We totally condemn it. So I don't think there's any harm in that. And part of me feels like the reason he doesn't is because he doesn't want to appease the left. And I know we're also sick of the calling us racist and these things that a lot of times we don't even we ignore it because it has lost a lot of its power. But I think when it's obvious in your party that a lot of folks in your party are headed that way, that you need to at some point condemn it. So hopefully he will
I think
eventually.
it's
I have
key.
high hopes for
Yeah,
Rupert. I have high hopes for the both of you. I still feel like, based on what I told you earlier about how Trump split the right and they all came together and united, I still have high hopes that eventually, 3 years from now, you guys will find some way to work together.
yeah. Well, I mean, we have to, because the Green Party is marshalling votes in this country in a way that I've never seen a party marshal votes before.
Mhm.
The There's something the Gadsad talks about suicidal empathy. We have something called suicidal apathy, I think, in the United Kingdom, where a lot of the voters know that the way the country's being governed is terrible, but they won't come out and vote for the right-wing parties. But the people who are supporting the Greens, particularly the Muslim vote, are going to come out in force. And if we're not careful, you get polls. Can I just explain a bit about what's happening in the polling in the United Kingdom?
Sure. And while you're doing that, please explain to me the core differences between the Greens and Labour, if you could.
So the Greens, since 2024, the Greens, who until 2024 had been the party for all things net zero and the greening of the environment and environmental issues, since 2024, for reasons that are not clear to me, they've become the de facto party representing the Muslims in the United Kingdom. And they've taken that mantle completely away from Labour. Or pretty much
the kings of oil. The kings of oil love the Greens. That's funny.
I mean, it's hilarious because, the Green Party is led by a Jewish guy. And they've taken in some pretty fundamentalist, pretty awful, from what I can see, supporter base from the Muslim community. And here's the big difference. When we do a poll in the United Kingdom, when a polling company goes out and it interviews 2,000 people and it asks them how they're going to vote, 30% say Reform, 25% say Green, and then, Tories and Labour and whatever. Mm-hmm. What that poll doesn't take into account is the likelihood of those who were polled in the poll actually voting on the day. And those who support the Green Party will absolutely come out and vote. Those who say that they would vote Reform actually won't come out and vote Reform. They'll stay at home. Many of them will stay at home. Many who say they'll vote for the Tory Party will stay at home. And so the polls are giving us a complete misrepresentation of how an actual election may play out. And we will see the Muslim vote come out absolutely for the Greens, and we'll see a lot of the vote that say they support Reform and the Tories and whatever, actually not bothering voting. And so people are saying there's going to be a thumping Reform majority at the next election. I think even if we had an election now, there's a chance the Greens would blooming win it. There's a chance the Greens would win it. And that would be a disaster for this country. So it is absolutely, coming back to where you started, Don, it's absolutely vital the so-called right gets its blooming act together and we stop having these stupid little squabbles and we stand for country first and we make sure we restore our country. The Tory party, Reform, Rupert, myself, we've got to start putting the country first. We've got to start putting our country first, not our politics, not our political parties.
No. Why do you think people are saying that, they're claiming that you're basically trying to split the vote on the right for no good reason? What do you say to that?
Well, what I used to say is that it's 3.5 years out from a general election. We've got to have the debate, the kind of debate that you and I are now having. Let's have these debates. Let's have a settled understanding of what it means, what's required to be done to save this country. And then we'll look at the electoral mathematics in 2028, 2029. But we do need to get our act together. And, I'm increasingly realizing the power of the Greens. I'm increasingly realizing it. And I think the situation is much more urgent than I previously thought. It's much more urgent that the right gets its act together.
So are the Greens like Labour on steroids? From what I gather, from what I've seen, it appears that they're kind of like Labour on steroids. They're left, but even further left.
They're complete. Yeah, they're like communist, sort of Marxist, environmentalists, Muslim vote. That's what the Greens are. They're complete. They're lunatics. They are literally lunatics. There is nothing good about the Greens.
Yeah, who's their leading candidate? So who's their Ben Habib?
The guy is Jack Polanski is their leader, and he's a Jewish guy, but he wants to make the case for Islam, which is interesting.
Yeah, what do you think about the what's going on with Islam right now? What's the latest on the rape gang inquiry? I know Rupert did his own independent rape gang inquiry. I know that they had Labour refused to vote on or voted no on a national inquiry. Where are we at now with investigating these 250,000 plus young British girls who were raped by Pakistani Muslim men?
Nothing is taking place. Nothing is taking place. But any party that cares about this country, any party coming into office that cares about this country, has to have a policy on male violence against women and girls. There has to be a policy on it. It now represents, of the crimes of which we're aware, Don, it represents 20% of all criminality in this
Wow.
country. And remember, when men are perpetrating violence against women and girls, you often don't know about it. It's happening behind closed doors. So that's the only the proportion the numbers of cases we know about represents 20% of all crime. Actually, the true statistic is probably much higher than that. And so this has got to be a policy area for any serious political party. They've got to address male violence against women and girls. They've got to address it head on.
Right. Well, let me ask you this, just for Advance UK, what's next for you? A lot of people are going, "Oh, Advance UK's done since Rupert came out." What do you have in mind? What do you have in store? What's coming up for Advance
Well,
UK?
look, Rupert, if Rupert had gone down a proper path, I think Advance UK was done. If it wasn't ethno-nationalist, if it wasn't going down this ethno-nationalist route, if it had a kind of democratic structure, yeah, fine, go, Rupert, you want to do it, off you go, buddy. Good luck. You have my best wishes.
Would you join him if that were to have happened? If that had been the case, would you have joined him?
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. If you look at on the 14th of Feb, as you know, I made a very open public offer. Say, let's get together. I'd love to get together. 10 days later, or 8 days later, I was tempering my invitation by the ethno-nationalism that was taking place, asking Rupert to explain what the philosophy of his party was. I don't know if you saw that on the 22nd of February, I put out a video saying, Rupert, explain your party, because I'm seeing this ethno-nationalism. But instead of rowing back from ethno-nationalism, actually he put his sort of metal to the, what do you call it?
Metal to the metal.
Metal to the metal. And he's gone full tilt, as I say.
Yeah.
And so this is concerning. And also his political party would appear to be completely controlled by him. And I don't think that's a healthy position for a political party.
Yeah, I've seen the offer you made him was amazing. It was you pretty much were just handing him the keys to Advance. You even offered to change the name. So I guess technically Advance could have become Restore, right? If he had accepted that offer.
I absolutely offered it. And you offered him the
you offered him the ability to take over the party. You offered to make it so that the college could not remove him as their leader, and you were just going to hand over 40,000 members to him. So, with such a sweet deal like that, why do you think he didn't accept the offer? And just personally, why do you think that Rupert Lowe did not accept that offer?
It's one of two or both things. It could be that he just didn't want any democratic structure to the party at all. He wants a party completely in his control, which I think is bad. I think it's very, very bad. Or it could be my ethnicity, frankly. It could be what he sees as my ethnicity.
And you think that you think potentially if that were one of the reasons he didn't, or if that were the reason that maybe he would have seen your ethnicity as a detractor to potential Restore supporters or memberships.
Yeah, could be. I mean, look, it's become quite clear that a lot of people who support Restore don't like me because of, they call me a Paki and whatnot. And
it is amazing. It is amazing. In 2 years of writing, with the guy the UK called the biggest racist on the planet, which is Tommy Robinson. In 2 years of being with him, I only experienced the opposite of that. I saw how black and brown people embraced him everywhere he went. I saw how he embraced them. Never witnessed any racism. I was not aware, and you and I spoke about this, Ben. I did not aware there was so much racism in the UK until after Restore and Britain was launched. And I'm not just saying that for clicks or anything like that. That's the honest to God's truth. I told you that. I just wasn't aware it was so prevalent until all these people come out of the woodworks, supposedly saying they support Restore. It's just so weird to me.
Don, I wasn't aware of it. This is a whole new revelation for me. I thought I thought the idea of white sponsored racism against brown or black people was just a myth created by the left wing. I really did. I didn't think it existed. I've never had it against me. I had some racism when I first came to the country in 1979. I've had no racism against me until now, until now. And I just really hope Rupert will get a grip of it. He can still do amazing things. He needs to get rid of this
element. Yeah.
this
No,
element.
my hope is the same. My hope is the same. I hope at some point he'll address it, and we'll get all that squared away. Because I really think that's minutia. I really think none of the skin color and all that kind of stuff, the racism, it's just so. It's going to hurt the country is what it's going to do, and you're never going to get anything done. That's exactly what's going to happen. Anybody who can't see that's a fool, period. Yeah, like I said,
100%.
it doesn't.
And can I just say something about
Go ahead.
Tommy Robinson?
Yeah, sure.
I would never have taken to the stage on the 13th of September if I thought Tommy Robinson was a racist. I've never seen Tommy as a racist.
Yep.
Every time I've met him, he's got more charm in his little finger than any other politician I've ever met.
Yep.
So that's all bollocks. That's all mainstream media trashing of Tommy Robinson. Why do they trash him? Because he spoke out about the rape gangs. Why do they want to trash the notion that the rape gangs exist and therefore trash Tommy Robinson? Because they believe in multiculturalism, because they believe in mass migration. And that's what we as politicians, Rupert, myself, Farage and others, we need to stand up to that crap. Yeah. And Farage should not denounce Tommy Robinson. He should see through the establishment bullshit. Sorry, I'm speaking very frankly now and using expletives.
No, I like
but he's
that.
got to see through this bullshit.
Yeah.
And Tommy Robinson being vilified as a racist is one of the great injustices that's taken place in this country.
I agree. Well, it's very telling that the ethno-nationalists denounced Tommy Robinson, isn't it? Yeah. It's very telling who the racists really are. But Ben, man, I appreciate you coming on, man. It's been a great conversation. I wish you the best. Let me know if I can do anything for you. Tell people where they can go to support you and Advance UK.
Well, thank you. You go to advanceuk.org.uk, advanceuk.org.uk. We're a serious, principled, pro-British party that will save the United Kingdom. We really would. And it is country before party, and it's party before me. I come right at the bottom of that scale. Please join up if you want to help the United Kingdom, save the United Kingdom.
Well, thank you, brother, for coming on. I wish you the best, and we'll talk to you later. Thanks for coming on, man. We'll see you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for watching. I'm Don Keith, and you've been watching The Real Beef.